Good evening. I want to explain just a few things about how this goes. It is a public hearing. It is not a normal business board meeting of the flood board. So our purpose is to receive input, to listen, to call upon the staff of DWR and the staff of the flood board if there are clarifying questions, and to receive that. There will be 2 more hearings. Next Monday we will be in Sacramento, and next Thursday we will be entirely online, assuming mine works. All right, the way you'll give comments this evening. If you are here in person and you wish to speak, we have a comment card. If you would fill that out with your name and give it to Mr. We'll call upon you. If you're here today and you don't want to talk, but you want to tell us something, we have a written comment card that you can do that. If you're here today and you leave and you think of something, send us an email. That's the way you make a comment. If you come up and tell me, I will forget. If you're online, I know that after 2 years, even I am used to the raise hand icon. So if you want to speak, do raise your hand. Ryan Jones, who is the board clerk, is going to monitor that, and he will provide me the names. So I will call upon you, which is very strange because I usually see the Zoom photos, but we don't this evening. And at that point, you will talk to us. So it will be in the room first and then virtual, just to let you know that. Any question? Okay. Our agenda tonight is pretty simple. We begin the meeting, which we have done. We will call roll in a session in a minute, and our agenda is 3 items. One is an item that is on every public government agenda, and that is comments from the public. And when I ask for that, it's comments for something not on our agenda today and for which you just want to talk, and we will say thank you. And then we will have a good presentation of the draft 2022 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan overview. After that, we will start the public comment period for that, and then when that winds down, we'll adjourn. Sound good? Shall we begin? Any introductions to be made? No. Okay. We won't go around the room. Anyone who comes to speak, you will say your name, of course, even though I probably will as well. So, Mr. Jones, a roll call, please.
Board Member Griego.
Here.
Board Member Ramirez. Here. Board Member Countryman. Secretary Johnson.
I'm here. Good evening, everybody.
Vice President Valines. President Dolan.
I'm present. That is 4 members of the board. We presently have a 6-member board. We do anticipate board member Valines. And we have 1 vacancy on the board. So we have a quorum. That is established. So I think I already reviewed the agenda, the 3rd item of which is review the agenda. So I was ahead of time. And the 4th item is there someone here who just wants to make a comment that is not related to the plan? All right. No. Is there anyone online that's raising their hand?
No.
Okay, then we will proceed with the main event. I'm going to call first on our staff, Program Manager Ruth Darling, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board staff, who will welcome this item and who is doing what. Good evening.
Good evening. Is the mic working? Yeah, okay. My name is Ruth Darling. I'm a program manager with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And I just wanted to thank everyone here and online for attending our public hearing on the public draft of the 2022 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update. Just a little bit of background. The Central Valley Flood Protection Act of 2008 states that DWR board shall adopt the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. In addition, the SB 5, also the Central Valley Flood Protection Act, states that the board shall hold at least 2 public hearings to receive comments on the proposed plan. At least one of these hearings shall be held in the Sacramento Valley, and one shall be held in the San Joaquin Valley. So this public hearing process is the board's compliance with SB 5. In addition, SB 5 states that the board shall also accept comments in writing with regard to the proposed plan. The board may make changes to the proposed plan to resolve any issues raised in the hearings or to respond to comments received by the board. The board shall publish its proposed changes to the proposed plan at least 2 weeks prior to adopting the plan. So as we have done in 2012 as well as 2017, 2022 will be the same, in which the board will receive comments on the plan and work with our colleagues at DWR to make any necessary revisions for a final draft of the flood plan to be adopted. The public comment period closes on June 6th of 2022. So after receiving comments, DWR and the flood board will work collaboratively to assess these comments and categorize them, review them, and the flood board will hold workshops. So in addition to our regular business meeting, the board also holds workshops on monthly. So we anticipate these public comment workshops will be held in July and August of this year. Those dates will be posted on our website, and we will be sending out emails letting the public know when those workshops will be scheduled and their venues.
Ms. Darling, if someone wants to be on that email notice, they can simply make that request. It's
That's
growing
correct.
all the time,
Yes.
as we know.
That's correct. My name and email is on the website as well as Ryan Jones. Please reach out to us and we can make that accommodation. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to my colleague at DWR, Mary Jimenez.
Thank you. Mary Jimenez is a manager.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Jimenez. I'm with the Department of Water Resources. Thank you for the introduction, Ruth. I'm pleased to be here along with Jason Sidley to give our overview of the public draft Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update. Along with Ruth and Jason and my other colleagues today, we look forward to hearing your comments at this venue and beyond, and responding together this summer to provide a revised draft of the flood protection plan that is responsive to those comments. So thank you very much for your time today and bringing those comments to us, and we look forward to hearing them. I wanted to begin by recognizing and respecting that California, including its Central Valley, is in an extreme drought condition right now. But despite that fact, it's important to recognize that flooding can and still does happen even during drought years. And it's just a matter of time before our weather patterns change from the drought condition we're in and swing back towards a wetter and more flood-prone weather pattern that's been known to occur in California. Among the key findings of this 2022 update to the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan is that our flood system in the Central Valley is increasingly vulnerable to these extreme swings between drought and flood. And so how do we need to respond? It's important to act swiftly to develop and implement innovative flood management strategies that span traditionally siloed water sectors. Where is the intersection important between flood management, ecosystems, groundwater, and water supply, for instance? We need to invest boldly in our flood system together over the next 30 years. We need to build and leverage multiple partners' unique capacity for funding and advocacy. And lastly, but certainly not least, we need to work together and with our Central Valley's most vulnerable communities to provide them protection as we move forward together. Next slide, please. The Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update in 2022 maintains the key premise of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan as the state strategic blueprint for flood risk management in the Central Valley. This is a second update to the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. The first plan was adopted by the Central Valley Flood Protection Board in June 2012. And as Ruth Darling mentioned, updating this Central Valley Flood Protection Plan in calendar year 2022 is specifically fulfilling the requirements of the Central Valley Flood Protection Act of 2008. Next slide, please. This 2022 update of the flood plan includes a suite of important and related documents. You'll see a snapshot of those on the slide. Among the suite of documents associated with this flood plan, DWR is developing an addendum to the Programmatic Environmental Impact Report for the 2012 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. That addendum will be made available later this year, along with the final 2022 flood plan update, and will reflect any changes made to this public draft in response to the public comments that we expect to receive. Next slide, please. And so as a system-wide plan for flood management in the Central Valley, this flood plan is a descriptive type document and does not represent specific decisions on projects that are implemented consistent with this plan. It prioritizes the state's investment in flood management over the next 30 years, working long range, and in doing so promotes multi-benefit projects and recommending ways to integrate and improve ecosystem functions associated with flood risk reduction projects in our flood system. Next slide, please. And so this 2022 update to the flood plan contains three primary themes: building flood system climate resiliency, increasing accountability and adaptation through performance tracking of investments, and strengthening integration and alignment between the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan and flood management investments with other important state water management planning efforts, such as the California Water Plan, the Delta Plan, and more. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll pause before handing over to Jason Sidley to take over a more detailed presentation on the public draft. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Sidney.
Good evening, thank you.
Our missing board member is walking into the hall.
I'll give him a minute.
You're very nice. We always try to plan for whatever traffic there might be, and sometimes we miss it. Tell him to hurry. Never mind. He's not punctual, so you may speak to those of us who were.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Excuse me. As Mary and, no, I have some right here, but thank you. As Mary and President Dolan said, my name is Jason Sidley with the Department of Water Resources, and I'm going to walk us through the public draft of the 2022 update. The slide you see on the screen now highlights the layout of the the public draft, as well as some of the components that accompany that draft that you've all received. It's laid out in 4 chapters, similar to the 2017 update. Chapter 1 being that context setting and thematic setting scene that talks about the 3 themes that Mary just highlighted. Chapter 2 is going to take us through the implementation progress, what's been done in the past with regards to implementation of projects, of policy issue recommendations, and of various technical analyses. Chapter 3 is what needs to be updated. What are we planning to do? Kind of that big picture risk, talk about risk, priority actions, and intended outcomes. Excuse me. And then chapter 4 is that implementation plan. How can we fund all the needs that are in the system, and what's that imperative to act? Additionally, in between chapters 2 and 3, you'll find what we're calling 6 regional overviews. Those are 2-page pieces that were developed in conjunction between the department and the regional flood management planning groups to provide a space for the regions to add some of their opportunities and challenges to the document, in addition to some of the information in the chapters. Also, we have 3 appendices that were attached to this document. The first one being what we're calling Appendix A, it's the CVFPP background. that is taking a lot of the information, that evergreen content that you're probably used to seeing if you've read the 2012 and 2017 plans, taking a lot of that added history of the SSIA and history of the CVFPP and moved it to an appendix to allow the update to really flow right into the context and theme setting. Appendix B is the legislative reference and reader's guide, which provides an overview of how the CVFPP and supporting documents meet the requirements of the Central Valley Flood Protection Act of 2008. And then Appendix C is the CVFPP supplemental recommendations, which provides supporting recommendations and details to the content provided in the recommendations piece in Chapter 3. Next slide, please. So consistent with recommendations from the 2017 update, the 2022 update will focus on those three themes of climate resilience, performance tracking, and integration alignment with other state water management plans and efforts. Some highlights from Chapter 1 include flood risk in the Central Valley is among the highest in the nation. The CVFPP updates are consistent with previous plans. They're not new plans that come out every 5 years. They're building upon the work of previous plans and updates. Building upon the outcome-based performance tracking effort from the 2017 update, the 2022 update will continue progressing towards tracking progress and performance of planned investments towards a set of intended outcomes, including what other benefits that could be achieved by developing multi-benefit projects. The narrative throughout the Chapter 1 and throughout the document is that in spite of all the investments that have been made across all levels of government, flood risk remains high in the region, and native species continue to decline, accelerated by projected growth and the effects of climate change. And this will continue to exacerbate unless effective actions are taken. Next slide, please. Chapter 1 also discusses developing flood management solutions that are watershed-based and how it's imperative as we look at ways to adapt to the effects of climate change on the flood system. Updating the portfolio of potential investments for the state system-wide investment approach, which was developed in the 2012 plan as the foundation of the CVFPP, will provide a portfolio that is responsible, balanced, and cost-effective, using information from DWR programs and information developed as part of the regional flood management planning effort in 2022. The 2022 update also begins the important discussion of inequities in the flood management system in the Central Valley and ways in which we can start to address those. Next slide, please. Early progress has been made. Chapter 2 talks about it's that implementation progress piece. So early progress has been made in implementing the state system-wide investment approach, which has effectively helped leverage state funds that have been received for the highest priority activities through DWR's flood management programs. Since 2007, on the screen, you'll see $3.5 billion in state funds has been spent, and another $500 million that have been committed and are currently being expended. Additionally, approximately 361 miles of urban and 120 miles of non-urban SPFC levees have been repaired, rehabilitated, or improved. Some highlights in the document that you'll see that highlight some of the investment successes between 2017 and 22 are the establishment of the FMAP program with dedicated funding. Additionally, one-time allocations of deferred maintenance and emergency repairs funding were approximately $200 million over the past few years. There's been appropriations of about $2.4 billion in federal funding for U.S. Army Corps of Engineers flood projects, and then funding for early system-wide multi-benefit projects such as the Yolo Bypass and small community studies. Next slide, please. Progress in partnerships, including the Yolo Bypass Cash Slew partnership, as well as other collaborative efforts such as the work on the updating and refining a flood management strategy for the San Joaquin River, are highlighted in Chapter 2. Implementation progress on many of the multi-benefit and restoration projects being undertaken in the regions are also highlighted in Chapter 2. So a couple project spotlights you'll find in Chapter 2 are one on the Southport Levee Setback Project and one on the Hamilton City Flood Damage Reduction and Ecosystem Restoration Project. Next slide, please. Chapter 2 also highlights the progress that has been made on other technical efforts since 2017, including the refined climate change analysis that has been undertaken as part of the 2022 effort. It also discusses progress that has been made on the outcome-based performance tracking framework, including work on tracking progress towards a conservation strategy, measurable objectives. Finally, Chapter 2 discusses the many efforts that have been in progress to align with other DWR planning programs to help make the implementation of the CVFPP more effective. Next slide, please. So as we move into Chapter 3 discusses the current understanding of the various implementation actions broken into 4 buckets, similar to the same as the 2017 update, system-wide, urban, rural, and small communities. And these items needed for that state system-wide investment approach over the next 30 years. It highlights the various priorities and long-term outcomes from both the state and regional perspectives. These priorities are consistent with the original 2012 plan also. Project spotlights on this chapter include, and are more forward-looking, for the regional flood management strategy for the San Joaquin River Basin and some of the next steps that could be taken in that effort. And then also the Black Rascal Creek Flood Control Project. Part of the portfolio of actions discussed are the various recommendations associated with the policy issues. We updated for this document the 2017 policy issue recommendations and added 2 additional policy issue categories. One surrounding climate change, another focusing on equity in the planning and implementation of our flood management system. Next slide, please. Chapter 3 includes results from the technical analyses that were undertaken as part of the 2022 effort. We built upon the body of technical work developed in 2017 by refining the climate change analysis and also incorporating new tools to evaluate expected annual life loss. The top line results are that implementation of the state system-wide investment approach has significant impacts to lessening life loss due to flood across the Sacramento and San Joaquin River watersheds. Next slide, please. Chapter 3 discusses the priorities and long-term outcomes for ecosystems in the watersheds. Drawing on information pulled from the 2022 conservation strategy, this update highlights the need to continue to prioritize actions for ecosystem resilience and various nature-based solutions associated with flood management. Chapter 3 includes a policy spotlight for expanding nature-based solutions and engineering with nature. In addition, Chapter 3 discusses how the sustainable use of agricultural lands can help achieve flood and ecosystem outcomes. Next slide, please. Chapter 3 builds upon the 2017 performance tracking effort as it further develops intended outcomes, indicators, and metrics for measuring progress of flood management implementation actions across a set of societal values. In 2017 update, introduced 4 societal values centering on public safety, ecosystem vitality, healthy economy, and other enriching experiences. For 2022, we have added a 5th value to track progress towards, which is equity and social justice. Chapter 3 also begins discussing how this performance tracking can be implemented. The graphic on this slide shows a very drafty potential way of looking at a way to present and display trends. Next slide, please. The 2022 CVFPP update highlights that while it is costly to prepare for and help prevent flood-related disasters, it is many times more costly to respond to and recover from a flood after it occurs. Implementation requires a shared responsibility and sufficient and sustainable funding from federal, state, and local partners. Excuse me. Chapter 4 lays out the currently understood costs for implementing the state system-wide investment approach over the next 30 years. Chapter 4 discusses how the CVFPP helps highlight and guide the state's investment needs in the Central Valley. It provides updated costs for capital and ongoing investments over 30 years, including laying out historical spending trends on flood management across all levels of government, aggregating all of the potential project information gathered from DWR implementation programs and also from the regional flood management planning groups to develop a current understanding of the overall cost for implementing the state system-wide investment approach over 30 years. And then building upon the work from the 2017 investment strategy, we continue to evaluate scenarios for funding this needed investment. Next slide, please. We also have, Chapter 4 also contains an imperative to act. And you're going to hear a lot of the similar points that Mary made in her opening, but they're very important points to make. We do need to continue to act swiftly to implement innovative cross-sector flood management strategies. For example, we must value a resilient flood system's contribution to broader policy challenges, such as groundwater management and ecosystem stewardship. We must invest boldly over the next 30 years, including investing in partnerships with local, state, and federal agencies, as well as with landowners and non-governmental organizations. We must build institutional capacity, move projects forward, and leverage each flood system partner's unique capacity for financing and advocacy. And finally, we must protect the Central Valley's most vulnerable communities, acknowledging and correcting historic inequalities. We must continue to evolve away from practices that constrain nature and towards those that work with nature, recognizing the risk reduction and ecologically regenerative power of a multi-benefit flood system. And then we must continue to identify the most appropriate path to reducing flood risk. Oh, that's the next slide, please, sorry. Among the Central Valley's most vulnerable communities. Next slide, please. So we must act now to minimize the next inevitable flood disaster. It's not a matter of if, but when a flood will occur in the Central Valley. Flood management solutions must continue to be innovative to span traditional siloed water sectors. We must be ambitious with our investment over the next 30 years to keep up with the effects of climate change on our flood and water management systems. Vulnerable communities cannot be left behind as we plan and implement our flood management systems. And we need to continue to build stronger collaboration between federal, state, local, and tribal partners. That's the end of my slides. I think, Ruth, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth Darling again with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. So this slide just represents where we're at with the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, as well as its supporting documents, the Flood System Status Report, the State Plan of Flood Control Descriptive Document, as well as the Conservation Strategy. So those supporting documents have been released for public review, and those final documents will be submitted with the final draft of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. So where we're at right now is the public hearing process during the 45-day comment period. That's the last row of this slide. And as I indicated earlier, once the 45-day public comment period is over and staff has an opportunity to go through comments, we will hold board public workshops on comments received on the plan and any supporting documents as well. Next slide, please. So the public draft milestones, the public draft was released on April 21st, and that was done through an email blast as well as website postings for the Flood Board and DWR. The 45-day public comment period ends June 6th, and during that time we are holding 3 public hearings. The next public hearing will be on Monday. You can advance the slide, thank you. Will be on Monday, May 16th at the Sacramento Natural Resources Building in downtown Sacramento at 10 to noon a.m., 10 a.m. to noon. And then we will have a virtual-only public hearing on May 19th at 6 p.m. And those links and venue addresses are also on the board and DWR's website. Public comments can be received through email or mail. Those directions are indicated on the Flood Board and DWR's website. And there's a link on the screen right now. There's an electronic comment form available upon request, and there's a web address online as well for submitting comments electronically. And this is the address for submitting comments via mail. Those will go to Jason Sidley with the Department of Water Resources. Next slide, please. And just a reminder again for our 2 remaining public hearings. And these are also posted on the Flood Board's website as well. Next slide, please. So that commences the presentation, and I just wanted to end right now and allow the public to make comments on the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Not so long for a plan that has been underway for well over a year. As the plan was being developed, the board held numerous updates of progress and allowing comments for that. We had workshops. We also did significant outreach to regional groups, local agencies that have something to do with flood management, and local elected officials. We'll get to the state folks when we need money. All right. I'm going to ask Mr. Jones if there's anyone who has submitted a comment card to speak in person.
President Dolan, there have been no comment cards submitted.
All right, the room has several very shy people. And then also folks who worked very hard to put this plan together, and appreciate all of that. Okay. Are you sure?
He's doing one. Maybe just let him talk.
No, he's a. Oh, you want to speak? Yes, I do. Well, you may. I didn't have your name, so now you need to give it to us.
Sure.
Thank you.
I seriously apologize, President Dolan and members of the board. Chris Elias is my name.
We were wondering if you were going to be here. I didn't see you come in. Welcome.
Well, I snuck in the back, but the reason why I snuck in was because I thought it was 6:30 p.m., but so.
You're right on time.
So it was a calendaring error on my part, so I apologize for making it late. But I do want to maybe just start by introducing myself. My name is Chris Elias with the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency, and to really take the time to thank you for paying us a visit today with your field workshop hearing to launch the CVFPP plan that update that is being rolled out to the community. We're really very grateful that you made the trek. It shows that you do care first, and that you have immense respect for our community, and we really appreciate that. And I also want to let you know that we've been participating and working with your staff very closely as the plan has been making its way for the past couple of years now, and we've been providing comments here and there, been active and actively engaged, in the evolution of the document. It's a very well done document, and I know there's still more work to be done, but we are delighted about the progress that's been made. Your staff has been very cooperative and collaborative, been taking the time to reach out to us, not just as professional staff, but also to our governing board, and that speaks a lot. So thank you for organizing it and really orchestrating the outreach that you've done to really bring this matter to its current state. One of the things that, a few things that kind of caught my interest, but let me kind of speak to just a couple. First, we're right here right in the heart of Stockton metropolitan area. And not too far from here is the Lower San Joaquin River itself. That's the main stem. And that in itself, we understand, based on projections, we'll be experiencing well over 3 times the current flow that's in that river. The system that is built right now is not sufficient to handle that flow. And we're working very collaboratively again with the state and our federal partners to see what we can do to mitigate. And then, but in the meantime, our board, the board of SJAFCA, has taken a proactive step to develop an adaptation policy that essentially allows for us as a community to have the room to make adjustments to our levee system as the conditions worsen. And we're very proud of that proactive effort and looking down the future and finding ways to ensure that we continue to protect our community. But one of the things I wanted to draw attention to is the fact that the level of impact that our community would experience is not matched by the level of investment that we need to make collectively. And as you can tell, from 2007 to 2022, based on Jason's presentation, we've invested as a state $3.5 million in flood protection activities. And his slide calls for ramping up the investment to be able to do things much more aggressively to raise upwards of about $30 billion or so, I believe that's the number, in about 30 years. Well, you do the math. If it took us 15 years to invest $3.5 billion, and then we're saying then we need to invest aggressively for the next 30 years, well, it doesn't quite compute. So which means we need to double up our effort as a community. It's not pointing fingers. I'm just simply pointing out the fact that maybe we need to find ways to be much more aggressive and creative, whether we need to go to our federal partners to get them more involved, or do much more locally, creatively, financially, to find a way to add not just to our adaptation efforts, but to the mitigation activities we need to put in place to ensure that we slow the risk that our community will face in the next few years. The climate change itself that's coming and the flows that will follow isn't waiting for the dollars to show up. They don't go one-on-one. So that means then we have to find ways to get ahead of the curve. So because we don't want to have a Katrina 2.0 play out here, right here in the heart of Stockton Metro. That's one. Then the other thing I wanted to point out is to amplify the last bullet on Mr. Ridley's slide, and that was about the vulnerable population that's here. Stockton metropolitan area, as you all know, has a disproportionate number of population of disadvantaged community. And obviously, when we experience the level of impact that's coming through the increases in flow that's coming down the main stem, that population is going to be hugely impacted. So hence we agree with the idea and the emphasis that we need to do more. We need to find a way to ensure that we do view our investments through the lens of equity and social justice. So those are the 2 points I wanted to kind of leave you with this evening, and to again apologize for coming in late. But I wanted to be here to welcome you to our valley, but it's never too late. So welcome to Stockton, and thank you very much for again paying us a visit and really having this field visit with us today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Elias. And you did see that there's a regional overview, Lower San Joaquin River, Delta South, and certainly
Yes.
We now have everyone with the plan has written indications of needs and challenges to get there. I had said early when I opened the meeting that this is being recorded, so we are going to have your comments.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
And I'll turn in my card late. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to provide a public comment and also is keeping their comment card in their hand? I said going once before and got Mr. Elias, so going once? Right. Then we'll move to those who have joined virtually, online, on Zoom, what do we call it? I would like Mr. Jones to call two names at first, the first one to speak and then the one who will come next, so we don't have a great lag. How does that work, Mr. Jones?
That works for me. Unfortunately, we don't have any raised hands at this moment.
We have no raised hands?
Yeah.
Thank you all for logging in. I can't see you, and I think you can hear me because we have an excellent sound person this evening. So if you wish to ask a question or provide a comment that you see needs to be addressed in the plan, do you know the icon where I can't do this? I'm putting my hand up like you can see me. Maybe you can, and then I'll call upon you.
President Dolan, we do have one hand now from Mr. Mark Berry.
Mark Bird?
Berry.
Barry. Okay. I have a hay fever, and that's not helping my hearing. Mr. Barry, you're on. Probably need to unmute yourself.
There it is. Is that, am I, hello?
Hello, yes, we can hear you. You might want to speak just a bit slower. There's a
Okay,
lag.
thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, President Dolan, and I appreciate the presentations that have been given and the amount of time that's been involved with them. My name's Mark Berry. I live in the Sacramento area along the American River Parkway corridor. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and I think the prior speakers addressed these, but, you know, to reduce flood risk, federal, state, and local agencies have expended, you know, over $2.2 billion for modifications to the Folsom Dam and for levee improvement projects to increase channel capacity. You know, given the billions of public dollars that have been expended to reduce Sacramento's flood risk, I'm concerned, why should the state allow projects that fill in the floodplain that reduce flood carrying capacity and increase flood risk? In this regard, you know, as we feel like maybe we're increasing flood protective capacities, I urge the board to maintain protections that we have had in the past, such as Title 23 of the California Code of Regulation, Division 1, Section 113B, that prohibits the construction of year-round dwellings within an adopted plan of flood control. Section 107 of the board's regulation prohibits the construction of residential structures within a designated floodway. So in preparing this new plan, I urge the board to maintain these protections, even though we may feel historic capacity has increased by these publicly funded projects. You know, in essence, we need room for rivers to be rivers, and I think that was stated in the presentations here. With climate change, historic modeling may be problematic, and future floodplains should, the future floodway plans should be maintained so that private for-profit residences that reduce a flood capacity are not allowed to increase. That's what I'd like to see involved in the plan. I didn't see mention of these regulations of not further filling in the floodplain in the existing plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. This is just a personal comment. It's eerie to just hear the voice and not see at least the 2-inch square photo. But that's the way it is this evening. Thank you for your comments. I think you heard that this is recorded, so we will have them. Mr. Jones, any other hands up?
There is no hands at this time.
Let me just say again, for those of you who took the trouble to log on, we do appreciate it. We would also appreciate it if you had a comment. But if you don't and you just wanted to learn, that's fine as well. You have 2 other opportunities to log on. Next Monday, 10 o'clock, or you can come to Sacramento to the Resources Building, and Thursday, the 19th at 6 p.m. One more call for hand up. That's really quiet. That doesn't happen at my house. One more call for in the room. All right. Do our presenters have any closing remarks? All right. I do. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the team for all of the hard work. Thank you to our flood board staff and board members who are certainly part of the hard work of putting this plan together and the outreach so that people know. Thank you to all of the consultants that have assisted us to make sure that things run smoothly, can be heard, can be seen, and have maps for people to look at. Thank you for board members who traveled to these meetings. I do want to say that Board Member Valines did arrive. He was listening on his phone, and so that means that we have 4 board members in the room, 1 online, 1 is absent, and there's a vacancy. So, am I covering it all? Mary Jane has her hand up?
No, just
Board Member Gregos, yes, we called her for the, yes. Board Member Grego, we were glad you were able to come virtually, like the other 15, and you're all very polite to not talk. I have no other comments other than these hearings will occur as scheduled. Please check the Flood Board's website for any information, and particularly for the email and process for how you can submit comments to us. That's the purpose of these meetings, so that we can have more robust workshops once the comment period is over. So thank you all. We're adjourned.